Hey, Richard Mellor here, Facts for Working People. I want to say a few words about the whole Korean situation here. I wrote a short piece about it the other day on the blog, and I see, this whole thing with the predator-in-chief here in the US, this accident of history, and probably an accident of birth as well. He's talking about hell and fury in response to Korea's nuclear weaponry and nuclear ambitions and this, that, and the other, and the threats to America, and he's going on like that. It reminds me of the during the Iraq War. I mean, there was hell and fury there. So I don't know how much more hell and fury they're talking about, but that was called shock and awe. Then when they invaded that country for no reason whatsoever. And yeah, I'm reading the Chronicle this morning, or I glanced at the headline. I don't get the paper; it's too expensive for just getting it for a crossword. But I passed by it in the coffee shop, and the headline, there was an editorial in there about, yes, they're dangerous. They were criticising Trump, but yes, they're dangerous. They're a real threat. They're the North Koreans and what have you. That's all we hear about, the danger, the threat they are to us. They were the part of the axis of evil, according to the imbecile Bush, who almost seems cuddly compared to this fella, although he wasn't. He's a war criminal also, and Obama has continued those policies. And so the Chronicle's going on. That's all we ever hear about is these the fear and the attacks and the threats against America. Well, I want to ask any working class person, when was the last time North Korea attacked the United States? Never attacked the United States. The North Koreans, or Koreans in general, have never attacked the United States. Korea was occupied by Japan, a brutal occupation from around, it was annexed in 1910. It was that ended during in the defeat of Japan during the war. By all accounts, it was a brutal occupation. Many of the what the US did, then there was a civil war. There was no Korean War. There was a civil war, and the US intervened on the side of one section of that civil war. And the section intervened supporting, like it did in Vietnam, a regime that couldn't get elected by its own people, were the former ruling class, generals, military clique, and others that were connected to the vicious Japanese occupation of that peninsula. That's who the U.S. joined, connected with, to defeat the Northern Korean, the communists as they call them, the struggle for the control of their own peninsula and their own culture after the expulsion of the Japanese at the end of the Second World War. So that's the only connection the US has ever had to them. They've never bothered us. They've never threatened us. From what I understand also, is that under the Bush, they offered under Bush, if the US would stop and the Korean stop having these military exercises, peering at them over the 38th parallel. Yes, they're paranoid. Yes, they have a potential to be dangerous if threatened. But we have to understand the history of it. Just like when we read about anything from our mass media, when we read about immigrants, why Latinos come up here. Very few American workers have a clue about the role of the United States in Latin America, in Central America, assassinations, overthrowing governments, and this sort of thing. So we have nothing to fear from this small little nation that's half of a divided nation, where there was never a war directed against us. It was a civil war for control of their own future. And so the question about why they would be paranoid, the US flattened that country. It destroyed most of the irrigation dams that were necessary for 75% of the nation's food supply. It did the same as it did in Vietnam. It bombed from the air, and of course that's why McCain is no hero, dropping bombs on people that can't shoot back at you. There's nothing impressive about that. So the whole history since the end of the Second World War including the US supporting the most vicious militaristic. Read a little bit about the history of Korea. I've been reading a little bit about the history of Korea. And the most vicious elements that the United States supported, U.S. capitalism supported there. They did the same in Afghanistan, didn't they, with bin Laden? They did the same. They're doing the same with the Ukraine. They helped to assassinate Lumumba in Congo and installed Mobutu, who killed a couple of million people. Marcos, the Shah of Iran, they assassinated Allende. They assassinated Rene Schneider, the Chilean constitutionalist general prior to that, with the support of Henry Kissinger. He's a mass murderer, Henry Kissinger. So part of the problem is that most of us working class folks, I'm a blue collar worker, and how many times do I hear that? Well, I ain't did nothing. Well, I don't know nothing. We all have working class expressions. Understanding somebody is more important than their grammar. If we understand each other, and whether we did anything or whether we know anything, that's excusable. But not trying to know something, by not seeking the evidence and not looking at the forces at play in society and trying to figure out for ourselves what the real situation is that there's no excuse for not doing that. I don't think I know another. It's hard to find any population that is more distrusting and finds government as distasteful as the American working class does, and yet they tell us about how we're being threatened by Korea, and suddenly we're all supposed to jump to it and rally around the flag. And think about this consequence: this tiny little nation would be wiped out by the United States. It wouldn't end there, of course. The Chinese would be dragged into it. We would not escape a nuclear. We would not escape the effects of it economically, environmentally, and what have you. But do we honestly believe that these people that had for some period have not developed the ability to drop nuclear weapons on the United States would be threatening the United States with it even before they were capable of it? Do we really think they want to take out Chicago? All we ever hear is how we're always under threat from attack. We're under threat from Iran. We're under threat from immigrants. We're under threat from African bees. I've lived in this country, I'm an American citizen, lived in this country for 44 years. Somali warlords, Muslims, you name it. There's always people that we are told that are trying to undermine our way of life. And meanwhile, the very people that are telling us are doing it internally. Read the piece I put on the blog about Walker and trying to bring Foxconn, that ruthless corporation in China, where workers are so humiliating, degraded, and they're treated in such humiliating ways they throw themselves off buildings. Walker in Wisconsin wants to give them enough tax benefits from the taxpayer of Wisconsin and bring them into the United States. What sort of character is he? He's the very type of character that has no concern for human life, whether it's in this country or whether it's out of this country. We can't trust their media at all. And if think about Guam. What is Guam? Guam is an American colony. It's an American colony, a little island that was bribed into supporting the United States through military power, through money and everything else. Just like Diego Garcia is. Look up Diego Garcia, that British base in the Indian Ocean. What's the British doing in the Indian Ocean? Cultivating the land? What they actually rent it out now to the US. The US can use that, can use Guam to bomb, to invade. We got 25,000 troops in Guam. I'm not sure how many thousands of troops we've got in South Korea. It's like the British Empire before its day was done, and the United States day will be done too. The difference is the presence of nuclear weapons. They can take us all out. They do not care. Think of the people that claim to be representing us, working class people, working class Americans. The Americans I've worked with for 30 odd years in my workplaces, 40 years in my workplaces, that I hang out with, that I drink with. These are my Americans. The people that make choices that can destroy our lives. They're not my American. I don't care what they call themselves. So The thing is that we have to take certain responsibility and try to understand why North Korea, the North Koreans are behaving the way they are. And as far as the United States is concerned in South Korea, it doesn't give a damn about democracy. They didn't give a damn about democracy in Cuba. They didn't give a damn about democracy in Little Grenada. I once read that the aid given to South Korea was greater than the entire amount of money aid given to Africa, the continent of Africa. And the reason for that is in the post-war era, they had to find some buffer to the spread of the Chinese Revolution, and so they had to develop after Japan. They were already occupying Japan. They had to develop this buffer zone to block the spread of the Chinese Revolution, the Stalinists, the Maoists in China, and that. Other than that. South Korea, if it was not part of that orbit, would have simply been another a cheap source of cheap labor for US companies like Taiwan, like the Philippines, and what have you. So whether or not we like the form of government these states took, that was like in Vietnam. They were struggling for self-determination. They'd beaten the French, kicked out the French. The CIA went in there. The Americans that occupied the vacuum that the French left. American imperialism were not there for anything other than to exploit those countries, just like the British were before them or the French were before them. And the only form of resistance took the form it did. And that they had a right to do that. But American imperialism is the problem there, and it's not North Korea. I accept that it can be dangerous, but it can be dangerous because of the role the US imperialism is playing. I don't believe for 1 minute. Imagine if we had spokespeople that said, we want you to live in peace. Have you heard the word peace once? We don't hear it. We just hear this propaganda about we're threatened, we're going to get nuked. It's the same old crap, and we shouldn't fall for it. But look into a little bit of history. That's what we have to do. Just like I did when I began to understand the role, what happened in Ireland, the role England played in Ireland, and what have you. So that was basically just what I wanted to say. Just a few words about that. That's it, really. So it's Richard Miller from Facts for Working People. I would like to say one more thing. On our Facebook page, Facebook has shut us down from being able to boost articles. They won't respond to me. They won't tell me why. They say that it's because we violated their ad policy. But I get no response from them at all. This is from a corporation whose boss, CEO, has got worth $25 billion. I can't get a response for him. So we're trying to get some help with that, see what we can do about that. But this whole Korea thing, the mass media in America don't believe it. Do some investigation for yourself and struggle to... We can't ignore politics, as Pericles said. We may want to ignore politics, but sometimes politics doesn't want to ignore us. We're led by madmen. If ever there was a rogue state, it's in Washington. If ever they're talking about this little fella in North Korea being mad. Look at what the US has done in the post-war era. What they did in Iraq. What they're doing in Syria. What they did in Chile, in Congo, in Iran. You know. So if anybody who wants to call anybody mad, we're living under it. So that's all for now. Richard Miller, Facts for Working People. Thanks.